Hello, Clash fans! Trample Damage coming at you today with an expose on the Barbarian King equipment. I know everybody has their favorite equipment for the King, but one of the questions I think is important to answer is what happens when his active ability has been used and all he's got left are his passive stats. A good way to show this is we're going to go through all the different combinations of hero equipment, showing the King fighting his way out of 3 rows of walls without using his equipment. In this example here, we're using the classic equipment of the Barbarian Puppet and the Rage Vial, and it takes the King 62 seconds to get out of that compartment with 3 rows of walls. The only benefit he's getting is the damage per second increase or the speed boost increase that he's getting to help him work his way through here. This example with the Barbarian Puppet and the Earthquake Boots is going to take the King 1 minute and 6 seconds to get through 3 rows of walls. I think this is an important thing for us to consider because in the majority of the attack, the active abilities are not going. Now, obviously, if we used the Earthquake Boots to pop through this, all the walls would go down instantly. So trying to compare different active abilities to passive abilities is a little bit tricky, but so much of the attack, the King is just doing his thing with his hit points, with his damage per second, and especially later in the attack, a lot of times after the Barbarian King. So here we go, Barbarian Puppet with a Vamp Stash, 54 seconds. So it was the fastest time so far. It was basically 8 seconds faster than the Rage Vial and the Barbarian Puppet. So now we're going to go the Barbarian Puppet and the Giant Gauntlet. The Giant Gauntlet gets a healthy damage per second boost of 180 DPS. It is the second highest base damage per second boost that you can wind up getting, and it happens to wind up being the fastest of the times that we've seen so far. No! It's still slower than the Vamp Stash. Right, the Vamp Stash only gets, I'm using air quotes here, only gets a 68 damage per second boost, but the 22% speed boost lets him eat through walls so much more quickly. Here we see the Barbarian King using the Puppet and the Spiky Ball. The Spiky Ball has the highest damage per second boost that you get from any equipment at 222, but it still doesn't allow him to go as quickly as he does with the Vamp Stash. Those are all the Barbarian Puppet combinations. Now we go into the Rage Vial with the Earthquake Boots, and this one is going to wind up taking us 55 seconds. Again, if we were triggering the ability, of course, the Earthquake Boots are going to wind up beating every other piece of equipment, but most of the attack, the King is going around, smashing away at walls, smashing away at defenses, fighting off enemy clan castle troops, fighting off enemy skeletons, and that is where the bulk of his attack is spent. Even with the Giant Gauntlet lasting for the 18-second time frame that it lasts for, the majority of his attack is spent with no active abilities running, and it's just the passive boosts that are going to wind up getting him through whatever he's doing. Here we go on to the Rage Vial and the Vamp Stash. And again, that 22% increase in attack speed for the Vamp Stash is going to make it a very powerful piece of equipment. This is one of the things that I love so much about the Vamp Stash that a lot of people don't necessarily wind up taking into consideration. Here we go, 49 seconds, so faster than we get with the Earthquake Boots, because of that damage per second and that additional speed increase. Because the Rage Vial gives him 128 damage per second boost, which is definitely strong. Here we go with the most popular, most heavily favored combination of the King, the Rage Gem and the Gauntlet. This equipment here pairs up very nicely with the King and is arguably the best active combination of any equipment the King can have. Passively, though, it takes him 52 seconds to get through those 3 walls using those 2 abilities. We move on to the Rage Gem and the Spiky Ball. This is a very high increase in damage per second. We've got 128 DPS boost from the Rage Gem, the 222 damage per second boost from the Spiky Ball, and he does manage to get through them very quickly at 48 seconds. So this means that the Spiky Ball combined with the Rage Gem was the fastest, whereas the Vamp Stash paired with the Barbarian Puppet was the fastest. Here we now go into the Earthquake Boots, which we have already seen paired with both the Barbarian Puppet and with the Rage Gem. Both times it was the slowest combination. We now see it here paired with the Vamp Stash, and it winds up coming in at 49 seconds. Now, the Earthquake boots do get 102 boost damage per second. And of course, the Earthquake boots would win hands down if we were using the Earthquake boots to wreck these walls. But the 102 damage per second is a nice passive ability that we can wind up using with the Earthquake boots. But the Earthquake boots paired with a lot of the other equipment is not as strong because it is a lower DPS. It's the second lowest damage per second increase. The Barbarian Puppet obviously having 0. We now pair the Earthquake boots with the Giant Gauntlet, and we wind up coming in at 52 seconds to get through those 3 rows of walls, which is slower than it was with the Vamp Stash, although it was faster than it was with the Barbarian Puppet. But it was the same amount of time it took to get down with the Rage Gem. And that's because the damage per second differential between the Rage Gem and the Spiky Boots, or the Earthquake Boots, it was 128 versus 102. Here we combine the Earthquake boots with the Spiky Ball, and of course we wind up at 48 seconds, which is again the fastest time. So we are starting to see a trend here that 222 damage per second from the Spiky Ball will wind up even outpacing what we get from the Vamp Stash. Here we move on, and it's no secret, I love the Vamp Stash. It's been my favorite piece of equipment since the first launch, and I don't think it gets enough credit for the amount of additional damage it's able to churn out by virtue of having that 22% speed increase. So there we saw the Vamp Stash and the Giant Gauntlet coming in at 45 seconds, which is the fastest time that we have seen overall among any of the combinations. But because the Spiky Ball has a slightly higher damage per second than the Giant Gauntlet, we see the Vamp Stash and the Spiky Ball coming in at 43 seconds, which is our new fastest time among all of the combinations. The final one is pairing the 2 epic equipments, the Giant Gauntlet and the Spiky Ball, both of which have the highest base damage per second increase that you wind up getting at 180 and at 222. And it takes him 44 seconds to get through these walls, which puts it in at the second fastest time behind the Vamp Stash and the Spiky Ball. Now, incidentally, I use the Spiky Ball and the Vamp Stash as my primary hero equipment with pretty much every single attack that I wind up going after. Here's the brief reminder. Barbarian Puppet, no additional damage per second. The Rage Vial gets 128 additional damage per second. Lots of damage during the active ability, of course. Earthquake boots 102 damage per second, and the Vamp Stash only 68 DPS, but the 22% attack speed increase means he hits 5 times for every 4 times he would hit with the other pieces of equipment. Then of course we get into our epics with the Giant Gauntlet, massive amount of damage that's being dealt when the ability is active, but 180 damage base increase. The Spiky Ball 222, it is the highest. So in summary, we see the fastest averages overall are the slowest is the Barbarian Puppet at 59.2 seconds on average. The second slowest is the Earthquake Boots at 54. Third, the Rage Gem at 53.2. Then the Giant Gauntlet at 50.4. The Vamp Stash at 48 seconds, and the Spiky Ball at 47.6. Very close to the Vamp Stash. No disrespect whatsoever to any of the equipment, because we know that these active abilities are so powerful and drive so much value from the Barbarian King. But of course, there are plenty of times when he is not doing his active ability on the battlefield, and these passive stats should not wind up being overlooked. It is why I am such a huge fan of the Vamp Stash. I hope you guys found the video informative and potentially thought-provoking for you. If you are interested, of course, make sure to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube, follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, any of the other places I post. Make sure to visit the Clash of Clans subreddit. There's always a lot of great fun content over there. If you like to see more, I do have some other videos that are, of course, talking about some of the hero equipment. I encourage you to test out some of these combinations. I went perfect in last Clan War League on 3 accounts in Champ 1 using the Spiky Ball and the Vamp Stash. It's a very powerful combination. Again, not taking anything away from that amazing Gauntlet Rage Vial combination, but you never know. There are some other great combinations out there. Hope you guys enjoy the video, and we will check you out on the next one.